What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Cool Colas here, and you are now tuning into a new video on my channel. For today's topic, we're going to be talking about who is the real villain of the movie Acrimony. So let's get into it. When it comes to the Acrimony movie, if I had to describe it, I would call it a compelling bad movie. Now let me explain. When it comes to this movie, a lot of people say that it was potentially the worst Tyler Perry movie to ever come out. I don't agree, but that doesn't mean that it's good. So follow me here. It's compelling enough that people can make the argument one way or another who the villain was. So it's compelling enough that the villain was debatable. And there could be multiple arguments presented one way or another when it comes to who folks believe the villain of this movie was. But it was still bad because there were so many things that were just awkwardly done, that were nonsensical, that were unrealistic, and just there were a lot of inconsistencies with this story. Most people who saw this movie could pretty much tell that the idea was for the movie to portray Melinda as the villain. And to me, the real villain is still Melinda. And we really need to get into why, because there's a lot of you all who are out there, especially the Shea Butter Samba class, who are saying, oh no, she was right. You know, the way that she acted, it made sense. I felt her pain. Or I get exactly why she moved the way that she did or why she wanted to kill him. Everybody loves to make different arguments about this, but Melinda is not only the movie villain, she is the real villain. Originally, when I saw this movie, I wanted to say that her whole family were the villains of this movie, but I had to really think about this because generally when I look at these old black movies or somewhat recent black movies, I notice that there's common things that they try to do when it comes to the dynamic of who they want you to view as the villain. A lot of times they will create this extremely villainous black man and have him be the big bad of whatever it is that they're showing in this movie. And a lot of times, although this person is portrayed as the villain, the real villain, the starter of the problems and the biggest issue is either a Shea Butter Samba, a Shea Butter Mama, an old nigga, or it's the white supremacist. I'm not saying that the black man is never the villain in any of these movies. What I'm getting at is that they tend to hide the even more pressing problems from a lot of the other characters in these movies because they don't want to hold certain characters accountable. And what they're hoping is that as folks watch these different movies, they're going to internalize these messages and then go about things the same way in real life, which is why we in the black community have a big problem with holding the Shea Butter Samba community accountable, but there being some level of normalcy to holding black men accountable in the black community. If anything, it's kind of over the top. There's somewhat of a weird pyramid type of thing going on where the first thing that you can assume if they are in the movie or if they had some direct issue in the movie is that the white supremacist is at the epitome of the problems of the movie. Now, if the white supremacist is not a factor in the movie, then you can automatically go to the old niggas. And then if the old niggas aren't, then it becomes a thing of is it a Shea Butter Samba or is it really the person that they're actually portraying, which tends to be a black man in most of these movies. Now, because I realize that movies tend to do this, specifically the black movies, my radar was going off like crazy because the white supremacist wasn't even really a factor when it comes to this movie. So the first thing I said to myself was, it's gotta be the old niggas. It's gotta be, because these are the people that they tend to ignore. I mean, they are literally glorified, glamorized, and they are treated as if they are immaculate. And when they are non-existent, folks act like they're not part of the problem, when a lot of times these movies are leaving out critical pieces that actually started with the poor decisions from some old nigga and how their decisions actually affected what you're watching in the movie, therefore making them the villain. But in this movie, I couldn't do that. And the main reason why is because one of the central problems with the old niggas is that they tend to cause problems because of their selfishness. They tend to make very poor and terrible decisions that leave their kids ultimately in poverty or with other issues that spiral into other things going on. Or they end up continuing to be a burden in the lives of their adult children. Now, in the case of this movie, one of the things that I had to look out for is not this idea of this old nigga being present and them being a problem in the movie, but more so them being absent. Are their actions, because of their absence, going to be ignored? And I had to really think about what were the things that the old niggas did in this movie. So the first thing I thought about was the fact that when it came down to Melinda's character, her mother left her some form of inheritance. It wasn't the most ideal inheritance because it looked like she had a life insurance policy and she also had a house as well too, or at least a house was left for her and her sisters. So there was some form of wealth that was actually left. So I can't actually get mad at the old Negroes here because they did what they were supposed to do, or at least her mother did. Now, it does beg the question of what happened to her father, what was going on there. But for the sake of this movie and the sake of this review of who's the real villain, it's pretty much irrelevant and doesn't really tie into anything that's important to the subject matter. Once again, going back over what I stated. So when it comes to Melinda's parents, we can't blame them as the villains in this movie. One, because Melinda's mother left her inheritance, which takes out the idea of the old niggas old nigga-ing, which is them not leaving their kids shit. But in this case, her mother did. Now, with her father, again, it's a big mystery. He basically just was not discussed. Now, that could be a bad thing. That could mean that there were some other things that happened between her and her father, or the mother and the father, that are not being discussed. But it was so left out and so just untouched. It's not even anything that I could really use to make the claim that he was the problem or whatever the case may be. Now, there's some theories, obviously, about what could have happened or what could have went down there, especially when it comes to Melinda's mental health. But I'm not going to go that far because there wasn't enough evidence or information for me to make any of the conclusions or theories that I could possibly come up with that would link her father to being part of the problem. So let's actually move downward to Melinda and her sisters. And we'll start from the beginning of the story. So Melinda and Robert are the two main characters at question that people tend to kind of go back and forth on, where they're like, who's the villain? Is it Robert? Is it Melinda? Robert being the love interest in this movie, and Melinda being, I guess, the villainous protagonist, for a lack of better words. So when Melinda and Robert meet, they bump into each other on a rainy day on a college campus. And what happens is they both drop all of their papers all over the floor, right? All over the ground. And so as this is happening, Melinda is spazzing out. Melinda is sitting there wailing on dude. She's swinging her arms and shit and beating on him and all this other stuff. And it's like just totally over the top. It's hyperbolic, it's dramatic, and it's just straight up abusive. I mean, she's literally hitting dude. She must have hit dude like 6 or 7 times even. And they bumped into each other, so they both dropped each other's stuff. And even in that moment, he wasn't hostile or anything like that. And here's the thing. Here's the funniest thing about all this. They didn't even really know each other. So Melinda was very quick to just swing on dude just because they bumped into each other. It was so extreme. I was just like, whoa. So one thing that this actually exposed was that Melinda had anger issues from the very beginning. And if you listen subtly, her sisters even point out that she's actually been like that since she was little. So she's always been at this stage where she's had like these anger problems, these outbursts, and becoming enraged in certain relationships. Now, in this case, when it comes to Robert's character, one thing that I noticed is that there was a scene after they bumped into each other and Melinda was pissed off. So she started swinging on dude and actually hitting him and blaming him for them bumping into each other. And then him trying to get his stuff together and whatnot. So there was a scene after that where he actually goes to her dorm room and he basically apologizes, sees if she's okay, she got her stuff and all this other stuff, and she's extremely hostile to him, even like verbally when he shows up there, and he apologizes and says he's sorry about the interaction and all this other stuff, and she's basically in so many words doubling down like, yeah, you better be. So I always find this very interesting because what they tend to do in black movies especially is have this dynamic where you have this black woman who is either hard to get, she's extra mean, she's extra disrespectful, she's even abusive in the case of Melinda. And then you'll have this dude who's extra nice, he's kind of gentle, he's kind of soft-spoken, he's kind of apologetic. He's supposed to be like this very like sweet dude, right? And so the reason why this is important is because they tend to show this in a lot of these movies because they often want to teach their audience that it's okay for black women to be verbally and even physically abusive towards dudes who show interest in them. And dudes should basically spend all their time, their energy and everything like that to go after a woman who is tough and who is disrespectful and who is mean, just like this, that she is somebody who is the prize. But it's also psychological because what it often mirrors is that the women who they are chasing are a lot like their mothers. Because what a lot of black men had to experience growing up was the fact that their mothers would act just like a lot of the women who were, disrespectful and liberal at the mouth and verbally abusive and all sort of stuff. They are going after women who are just like their mothers who did the exact same thing. Because in their minds, this is a symbol of love and this is the symbol of how things just are. So I think that they were trying to portray that when Robert was acting super meek and kind and all this other shit, when he was going up to Melinda, and then Melinda was still very hostile and disrespectful. And they're also just telling women, hey, it's okay for you to be this way. It doesn't help a lot of times that the folks that this dude tends to associate with actually affirm that the behavior of this woman is acceptable or that he is lucky to be able to chase a woman like this if she is somebody who showed attention back. So a lot of times they create this dynamic. I'm not saying in this movie particularly, but I'm just talking about the psychology of it. They tend to make it seem like not only is it a thing of this dude has made the decision to chase this woman because he sees that in his mother, but he also has people around him who tend to affirm that this individual's behavior is okay. And again, this is just the way things are. It's kind of like this idea of, let's say that you are a person and you have an issue with a parent, specifically your mother. The first thing that this type of person will want to do is say some shit like, well, that's your mama, that's family, that's yada, yada, yada. So, it is what it is. You got to forgive and forget. So it kind of gets into that type of territory. So it's so funny because a lot of times this is very psychological. A lot of times dudes will go after this person, not just because this is something that they've seen in their household, but other people are almost shutting down the types of dudes who may question or have a rebellious spirit and maybe feel like something might not be right with this type of thing. Now let's talk about Robert for a second. One of the reasons why I said that I don't believe that Robert is the villain is because I just had mixed feelings about his character altogether. And the reason why I had mixed feelings is because there was I would call this more of an agenda. I've called it a trope in the past, but an agenda that was placed onto his character that I tend to see placed on black male characters in these movies. And it's what I would call the beyond belief agenda. So a lot of times when you have this black male character, they tend to have this individual who either has some good points they make, or some good qualities or good traits, or they have a lot of potential, or although they're somebody who's presented as villainous, there's some things that they may do or they may say that actually makes sense, that almost divides you on how you feel about them. But with the beyond belief trope, what they tend to do is, in some cases, they have a compelling argument that would make the audience side with this black man, either in his plight, or just say that this is a likable individual despite the intention for them to be villainous. And what they'll do is they'll have that character do something beyond belief to sway the audience back to basically say, oh yeah, this person is definitely the villain. So now the attention is taken off of the good things this individual does, or the good parts of this individual, and you've now focused on this very just crazy ass random thing that they threw in when it comes to this character. And so you see with Robert, this is like something that they do all the time, and they create this level of mixed feelings and even like ambivalence when it comes to his character, because they really made his character not shit, but also a decent person at the same time. And you just felt weird about it. Like, it was very inconsistent. When it comes to Robert's character, it's kind of hard to tell what his character is truly like, because there's moments where you can see that he is a nice person, he's a kind person, he is a person who is on a mission to do something great and to do something constructive. But then they also make him this bummy character, this person who is a user, a cheater, a schemer, sneaky, and somebody who also isn't very loving and caring, and also doesn't notice the little things. So they try to add, again, this mixed dynamic. So they're not really showing kind of who his true character really is. If I absolutely had to guess, I would say that Robert's character was somebody who had a lot of issues, a lot of flaws, and most likely should have just been left from the get-go, because there were a lot of things that he had to work out. But at the same time, there were also things that, in trials and tribulations that he was going through, that also made his situation tougher than what it was. So there's things that he could have actively done that I think would have made him a more responsible and likable character, because again, his character was questionable because of some of the things he chose not to do. But when it came to the things that he did do and his intentions, it was clear that he also had good intentions to a certain extent as well. I almost want to say this character might have even been on the spectrum a little bit, because there was a level of aloofness to him, and he just wasn't socially aware of the way that he was affecting Melinda, or at least he just didn't care because he was so absorbed in himself, which others probably are going to perceive that as selfish, right? But at the same time, Robert also was somebody who, again, he was hyper intelligent. Like, he was able to get this whole battery started, and he really didn't have a whole lot of materials outside of the things that Melinda was giving him in order for him to kind of practice his craft. I also found it weird, once again, that he was a black boy who was living in a trailer park. His parents didn't raise him. Then he was raised by his grandmother. His grandmother died. Then he was raised by his aunt. Then his aunt wasn't there. That was a whole lot. And that was kind of strange. So that's why I said that there's some beyond belief aspects with that. Also, too, the reason why I tend to lean on the fact that Robert was a good person with selfish tendencies and maybe aloof tendencies that kind of got in the way of people actually seeing his character as good versus him being a bad person, is because Robert, his whole battery thing actually ended up working out for him. So a lot of people could say that that's a freak accident, and that's neither here nor there. But the point is that when he was able to get the bag because his whole battery idea actually worked, he got a lot of money. And usually when someone gets money, and shout out to my man Marcus Bowden for bringing this up to me, because he's the one who put this into my head, and ever since then I can't get it out. But I noticed that typically when it comes to money, it amplifies the way that you actually are when you get a lot of it. It doesn't make you a better person. And Robert at the end was atoning for all the things that he had done to Melinda. So that's why I say that if this was a thing of us looking at money amplifying one's personality that's already there versus, money making them good all of a sudden, what it shows is that Robert probably was a good person from the get-go. Now, again, the movie makes it so ambiguous, it's hard to see it one way or another, but that's where the beyond belief thing kind of chimes in, because now we're like, okay, there's a lot of inconsistencies here, because now he has a lot of money, he should be more of a jackass, he should be more selfish, he should be more of these other things that they portrayed him to be from the get-go. Because here's the thing, let's look at Robert's sheet, because again, Robert really wasn't shit either. Robert cheated on Melinda, he used Melinda, he willingly took the things that Melinda was giving him. Robert wouldn't get a job, especially when Melinda was saying that she was tired. Robert wasn't showing affection to Melinda. There were a lot of things that were wrong with his character. So I want to make sure that we get all of that out the way before we really dive in deep to Melinda's character. Now, again, I said this before. When it comes to Melinda's character, it was made very clear up front that she had some mental health issues. Now, the reason why that's important to note is because what people are trying to make it seem like is that you have this person who's a scorned woman or became a scorned woman over time versus this person who was like this even before Robert was actually in the picture. Because for her to wail on somebody who she does not even know over a small misunderstanding, that being they bumped into each other, which is partially her fault, that shows you a lot about who she was before she even met Robert from the get-go. So now we're looking at Melinda's character at this point. Melinda also was somebody who, from my perspective, caused a lot of the things that happened to her, but then blamed Robert to a certain extent for those things. In some cases, there were a few things that he could have done better, or there are things that he should not have done, but ultimately, Melinda caused a lot of the issues that she basically had. A lot of these things that she did were self-inflicted. Like, for example, when she caught Robert cheating, the proper thing for Melinda to have done would have been for her to just left him and just not wanted to deal with his ass whatsoever. But instead, she took him back when he came crawling back. That was her choice to take him back in. The other thing that she did too is when she found him cheating, she drove her car into the trailer that Robert and the chick that he was cheating with were actually in at the time where they were getting it in. And she made it seem like that was his fault because what it caused was for her to not be able to have kids because it affected her lady part. The reason why I said that's Melinda's fault, as horrible as that sounds, is because Melinda just simply did not have to do that. She did not have to drive her car into a trailer. You don't have to gamble that part of your life away because of how upset and mad you are. Now, again, she had mental health issues, so I don't want to ignore that. But at the same time, to blame that on Robert, that is not acceptable. It's not acceptable to literally say, hey, it's his fault I can't have kids because I drove my car into his trailer because I caught him cheating, instead of simply just leaving. And I know a lot of chicks are going to use the young and dumb argument. I already know what type of time y'all are on. But the reality is that you cannot blame Robert for the action Melinda committed. The next thing that we need to look at is this idea of her feeling like he used her. It's like she was always saying that he always had a way of asking for something without asking for it. Here's the thing. Homie did not ask for almost any of those things that Melinda actually did for him. So the reality is that she voluntarily gave these things to Robert. Now, am I condoning somebody being a user and just taking and taking and taking? No, absolutely not. I think that there needs to be some accountability to Robert as well too for doing that. But at the same time, Melinda voluntarily gave Robert all of these different things, and it was because she quote unquote loved him. So a lot of women like to say that because she did so much for him and he basically used her and got her to the point where she was in the hole and she lost her house and she lost everything that she had. A lot of people like to say that that was Robert's fault for that. No, that was Melinda's fault for that, because Melinda needed to put up boundaries. Melinda needed to tell Robert, hey, look, listen, like, I need you to, get on your game. You need to step your game up. I need you to get a job so you can help me kind of basically pay the bills and keep this place up and keep things moving. That's another thing about the Melinda character that I didn't like. She had a bad habit of, when her hating ass sisters would give her good advice, she wouldn't listen to it. But when her hating ass sisters gave her bad advice, she would totally listen to the shit. Because when they told her, hey, don't tell him about the money, don't be having him in on it and all this other stuff, she was like, oh, no, I'm just gonna shower him with stuff. Now, when it came to, the bad things that they basically did, where they were hating, because these bitches were hating like hell on Robert's ass even before he had even did anything bad. And she was sitting there and she was basically like, she was like, like maybe he is a loser, maybe he is, not all that like you all were saying. Melinda really needed to learn the lesson that no one can force you to do anything that you don't already want to do unless they are putting your life at risk. Again, I want to make it clear. We're not condoning Robert being a user. We're also not condoning Robert taking advantage of the opportunities that were given to him. We're not whatsoever. But Melinda willingly did a lot of the stuff that she is blaming Robert for. And a lot of it is off of impulse. It's a lot of her having these very codependent relationships. And that's the next thing that we need to get into. This movie made it clear that Melinda has BPD, bipolar personality disorder. But I think that she has more than BPD. I think that she has I gotta say this. I gotta say it. I'm not a psychologist. But this is what I believe is happening. I think that Melinda has some codependency issues because she has an extreme dependence on her sisters. She listens to her sisters even to a fault when she shouldn't. There's also this level of her sisters almost acting like her mothers and being haters when they are also in these relationships that are not happy and whatnot. So there's that type of thing going on as well too. She has a level of codependency when it comes to Robert as well too. It's almost as if there's this idea that she has to be attached to people. And, that's something that I think has kind of come to her detriment in this movie. Usually when it comes to codependency, it's usually when individuals have this unhealthy attachment to other individuals who have these different toxic traits, or in some cases addictions, or whatever the case may be. And you can see that she has unhealthy attachments to Robert's character, and she also has unhealthy attachments to her sisters. And a lot of times when people have codependency, it comes from them having a dysfunctional family dynamic. And so we can kind of see in this movie that her sisters create a lot of dysfunction because they almost are like her pseudo mothers. But at the same time, they're also like her hater friends, as well too. I mean, think about even the scene where they're all at the house and they're at dinner together and they're basically like, hey, look, we're married right now. And, we're going to move out, but you got to make sure you get a job so you can keep this house up. It's almost as if you're seeing a parent talking to a child. So you see the codependent relationship there. And it's almost as if that spirit of her having to be dependent on somebody who is toxic, somebody who has had a dysfunctional shift in these relationships, has to also have that in her partner, which is why you see her attaching herself to this Robert character who is dysfunctional himself in different ways. Now, one thing I do want to say is that although Robert, again, is dysfunctional in his own ways, we need to realize that Robert did make it clear what he was trying to do from the get-go. He's like, yo, I'm on a mission to get this battery working, whatever that looks like. Are you going to be my ride or die? So he laid out exactly who he was and what he was planning to do. But I think that Melinda was hoping that he would be just a regular dude who would just take care of business and stuff like that. And he made sure that he used every opportunity that he could to get to the mission, which was making sure that battery took off. Even when it came to her sisters, doubling down again on the almost kind of like strong mother type of figure or figures that they were trying to present themselves as, I noticed also that they were very aggressive and their dudes were kind of passive and they almost were talking down to them and talking to them real crazy as well too. So it's almost as if there's this family dynamic of women who are very aggressive, bossy, disrespectful, again, liberal at the mouth, and they treat dudes a certain way. Now, Melinda having that type of upbringing combined with the fact that there were definitely some mental health issues presented what we actually saw, which was a woman who has this kind of strong black woman type of gimmick, but at the same time, has mental health issues that are amplifying a lot of what we're seeing. At a certain point, after everything that Melinda had been through, between Robert initially cheating on her taking him back, her spending all this money and going into her insurance policy to buy him a car even before he actually cheated on her, and him basically, not getting a job and having her carry all the weight. And also too, even when he was presented with opportunities, he basically shitted on them, like with the brothers when they offered him a job and he basically bailed on them, fucked up their business just to do something with his battery and all this other stuff. They got to a point where she was like, you know what, I am done. But at this point, her being done was based off of the fact that she let her sisters get into her head and basically tell her, you know what, this dude ain't no good, and she wanted to be done with the relationship. And then that's when the disrespect came. Anytime a disrespect comes into a relationship to the point where you see your partner as a loser, you see that person as somebody who can be denigrated, especially if you do it in front of other family members and whatnot, it shows that the relationship is most likely coming to an end, especially when you're at the stage of where Melinda and Robert were at. Now, when it comes to these two characters, it was clear that she was done with him at that point, up until his whole battery thing basically took off. Now, here's the thing about everything that I'm telling you all. The reason why I said that Melinda was the villain at this point isn't even because of the fact that she chose to do a lot of the stuff that she chose to do and Robert just took advantage of it. Because at this point, you can make arguments on either side that this person was wrong or that person was wrong. But the reality is that there's one specific thing at the end of the movie that makes Melinda the villain. When Robert came into some money, he gave Melinda a check for $10 million and got her house back after it foreclosed because of his actions. And this was post the divorce, after he had begged her, to not go down this path and all this other stuff. And again, I don't blame her because, he was doing a lot of bullshit, but she wanted it all. This man gave her $10 million so that she could kind of get back, get her life back on track, or even beyond back on track, to have like a great life at that. And he was going to move forward because at the point, again, where the disrespect was there and all this history had been built and all these bad things had happened, it should have been over. It should have been done. And Melinda should have stayed on her square, but she didn't. She wanted it all. So she got greedy and she got selfish. The message that they were trying to portray to black women through this movie was that when you go through things in a relationship and a dude does you wrong or inconveniences you or makes you go through pain that you should not have had to experience, they believe that their get back can be just as bad or worse or whatever the case may be than the pain that they had to feel in this relationship. That they make it seem like anything that they do after that is something that is acceptable. So, for example, if a dude happened to cheat on you, it's acceptable for you to burn up all his shit. If a dude cheated on you, it's acceptable for you to bust the windows out his car. It almost becomes a thing where it's either a joke or it's something that's seen as, a right for this woman to do. Look at all the pain that you put her through. Think about it. What if a dude was put into that situation and the roles were reversed? You would never be able to see a dude who basically got with a woman, saw that she was cheating on him, and then took her back, bought her a bunch of stuff and all this and whatnot. And then later, even after she divorced him, She said that she was going to give him a $10 million check. I know all this is unrealistic, but just follow me. The problem with all that is most of you all, if that dude after that went back and said, you know what, I want it all, I'm going to take Melinda's ass to court. I'm going to make sure that I get half of what that battery was worth. Most of y'all will look at that dude cross-eyed and say, what the fuck is this Negro on? He is lucky as hell he even got that. Matter of fact, it wouldn't be a debate. Everybody across the board would be saying that Robert was out of pocket. And the reason why this is important to note is because oftentimes nobody looks at the other side of these different situations. Most of y'all, if y'all saw this, will be going on and on and on and on about nice guys. Y'all be like, look at these so-called nice guys. They're not nice at all. Look at them. They're just users. They did all this stuff. He did all this stuff so that, you know, he could basically get what he wanted. So, but really he got what he deserved. So there's no sympathy for him. So chicks will be all over that if it was a dude doing exactly what Melinda was doing to old dude. Because here's the thing about 10 million. 10 million is a lot of money. And even then, that was almost 10 times what she had to begin with in the first place, including the life insurance policy and the house and all this other stuff. Because although she was in the hole, he more than made up for it. He basically, you know, did 10 times that, right? And some people, when they are in situations like this, especially when a lot of it is self-inflicted, they don't get a damn thing. And she got 10 million and she wanted to off him at some point and mess up his new marriage and all this other stuff after they had moved on. And she was the one who said she wanted to move on. She made that clear. Now you can't renege and then go back to it and say, this dude is just tied to me forever whenever I choose. That's not fair. That's not right. We can't do that. So that's why I say that she's the villain, is because, yo, you could have got not a damn thing. Like literally, this is some Mariah Carey shit, you know, women going online and basically saying that they should be compensated because someone broke their heart, someone hurt their feelings, somebody put them through something. That's fucking ridiculous. That's ridiculous. A dude could never do that. And I'm not trying to make the dynamics the same. I'm just trying to put it into perspective. And that's another thing with her. There was a lot of boomeranging. There was a lot of, you know, there's one point where she said she would just cut her losses and get the divorce, and then she wanted him back. So it was like she wanted the relationship, she didn't. She wanted the relationship, she didn't. So there was a lot of that going on as well too. And, you know, that happens obviously in relationships and whatnot. But I think the point I'm trying to make is that she clearly was in this still codependent relationship mindset where this was somebody who she was attached to, even though she had detached herself from him. So this is somebody who she was attached to, although she had detached herself from him by divorcing him. It's almost like a yo-yo. It's like I'm going to let the thing go, but it's going to come back to me, or it better come back to me. She almost had that type of mentality. So to summarize, for those of you all who are trying to figure out, after everything that I just discussed and broke down, what are the main reasons why Melinda is the villain? Well, one, she's the villain because she had mental health issues from the get-go that were not taken care of, therefore causing the issues that we saw at the very end, which is that people were losing their lives, or she was trying to make it where people were losing their lives. Number two, she had enough money to start off fresh, have a new life, have a bunch of money where she was good, but she wanted it all. So it shows the greed. Maybe the greed the entire time, but certainly the greed that was there at the end after she made the decision to actually divorce this dude. It should have been over and done with. And as a matter of fact, she should have been grateful because she could have got nothing. The third reason why Melinda is the villain here is because Melinda's problems, in a lot of this movie, were self-inflicted in things that she started, but she put the blame onto somebody else. She would always blame other people, specifically Robert, for why she ended up the way that she did. So this was part of the problem as well too. Number four, she's the problem because here's the thing. She actually had resources that were given to her by her parents in this case. And the way that she decided to squander them was to use it on a dude who really didn't have his priorities or his shit together, which was a poor decision that she chose to make. I could keep going on and on and on, but I think that this more than suffices for reasons why she was the problem for what was going on in this movie. Because let's be real, the problem could have been solved if she would have just told Robert she was done the first time that she saw him cheating. Alright, y'all, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed what I had to say, and I'll definitely have more to come, so make sure you stay tuned. I would love it if you would hit the like button, subscribe button, share button, and bell icon so you get notifications for whenever I come out with new content on this channel. Other than that, I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.